A simple fact of life is that people like and enjoy and stick to the stuff they know. Same goes for gamers, because a lot of gamers are people. Gamers love to keep playing the games they know and already play. So it's very hard getting players to come to your game and enjoy that game, because they mostly want to play the thing they expect to find when they download your game. Hey, I'm Pascal from Orangepixel and welcome to another video. Let's talk about genres, mixing up genres and what to avoid when you do that. There are a couple of things you can easily avoid, and you should, after the intro. So I've been mixing and matching different genres and different elements from games in my own project. One example, recent example, is Residual. I mixed survival with platforming, but also in a different way than done usually. So a lot of people saw Residual, expected some sort of Terraria-like game. They expected that type of game, and it wasn't. I mean, we have trees, we have above ground, we have underground, and elements of survival and base building, but in a different way, very different from that game. So different that a lot of people expecting that were just not happy with what they got. But luckily for me, as the game developer, a lot of people that actually saw the game and also followed development, and they did understand what was given, and they actually gelled with it and loved it. And a lot of people have been spending many hours in that game and played different planets. So that's, as a game developer, pretty much the thing I want to see. I want to see gamers enjoy the world I create. And maybe I wasn't really certain of what I was creating myself at that point. So it was a little bit of a mix between, yeah, I'm gonna do something like Terraria, survival-like, but not really, because I want to do it in my own way. And that's straight away too far from the thing that many people would expect. Almost made that same mistake on Gauntlet of Power, a game I'm currently wrapping up, and it's almost done. It's going to be released in a couple of months. Originally, I started out trying to create a Vampire Survivor bullet heaven-like game. You know the type. You run around, auto shooting all directions, everywhere, monsters from everywhere coming at you, and you're creating so many bullets that you're pretty much the bullet hell. And that's why some people call it bullet heaven instead of the bullet hell, shoot 'em up, where bullets are flying at you. If you're not following this, look it up. It's a whole new type, and there's so many games coming out that use that right now. But honestly, as a gamer, I don't really like it. So I was creating this, and then when I was playtesting it, I was like, this is missing something. This isn't the type of game I want to play. So I started mixing it with a dungeon. Because that's what you do as a game developer. You mix everything with dungeon elements. I created a little roguelike that suddenly was moving more towards something like Binding of Isaac and more or further away from Vampire Survivors. However, I was calling it Vampire Survivors type game with roguelike elements, and I slowly moved and shifted that over to what I call it now, a roguelike inspired by Binding of Isaac with a interesting power-up and weapon system. Because I know people that like Binding of Isaac will enjoy this game, but I also think that Bullet Heaven players will probably not like all the extras that are in this game. It's not their type of game anymore. It's more the roguelike, proper roguelike, Binding of Isaac, dungeon crawling type game. So I've been slowly moving my communications about this game towards that and further away from Vampire Survivors. Now what's interesting is that I'm also started my next project, Space Grunt 3, and with Space Grunts I always try to stick to turn-based gameplay. The original one was pretty cool, but also pretty basic, turn-based, just very fast, because I like arcade games, and a lot of turn-based games were very slow, and then you could click your characters and they would move their turn, and then you would the option to shoot, and then you have the option to move the other character, and that's just not for me. I wanted fast, quick action, but still turn-based, and I made that possible. And I've seen a few games since that actually adopted that fast turn-based element, which is interesting to see, and I'm not sure if I was the one starting that, but I'd like to think so. I also created Space Grunts 2, where I tried to mix in deck building and playing cards. This was around Slay the Spire. That was a hit game. I wanted to create something with cards, and I think it worked, but I can see that a lot of players, especially who played the first one, might not be interested in the second one. I can see that, but I still think it has a lot to offer, and it's turn-based, except that all your items in the game and your weapons are cards that you play out and you collect them in the world. I think it's interesting. So make sure to try it out if you haven't. It's on discount and sale every now and then, and it's on many platforms. Point is, I'm working on part 3, and I wanted to go back to the original Space Grunts. So turn-based, no deck building, no cards, playing cards, all that stuff. And I have that up and running, but I'm a game developer and I want to keep myself entertained and interested, and I wanted to twist it up a little bit. So I had this weird brain fart the other day, and it's just a very tiny idea. What if you are limited in the amount of turns you have? I'm not sure if other games did this. I haven't played that many turn-based games, but what if we take the original Space Grunts, but now you enter a spaceship and you have like 320 turns to accomplish your goal. Honestly, haven't set a goal at all. Maybe reach the core of the spaceship, maybe find certain elements. Whatever the mission is going to be, you have a set amount of turns, and it will be interesting to add certain items you can collect to increase those turns, or maybe certain damages that be done to you will decrease those turns. There's a lot of room to play with this element, but my original idea, turn-based, but you have a limit on how many turns you get to play. As impulsive as I am, I posted this idea on my Discord, got some mixed response. Some liked it, some don't, some didn't, some think it's terrible because games with a timer are no fun. And I agree on that if it's an action game. But in this case, the turns aren't your timer, it's more, let's see, like you have an X amount of oxygen and you need to escape the room before you run out of oxygen. That's pretty much what this is gonna be. But because this idea is just so very thin and I still have to develop it and evolve it and turn it into an actual game, so mentioning this to even now you as an audience, turn-based but with a set amount of turns, your brain will start doing things. It will try to come up with how this plays and how this looks and how this feels, and that can go in a very similar direction as my head went, but it will probably go in a very different direction based on the games you played or the type of gamer you are. So you're either gonna love it based on where you end up, or you're gonna hate the idea based on just a couple of things. I haven't really mentioned how this is all gonna play out. I haven't really figured it out myself. I haven't thought about what the end goal is, and if you can extend the amount of turns, or does that mean that shooting your weapon is a turn or just moving is a turn? So many questions still that need to be figured out, but that's the fun of game development. That's pretty much why I create games. It's coming up with an idea and trying to make it work and fun and entertaining for other people, but also for myself. I just like creating games like this, and I like to mix it up because that's the game developer I am. I cannot create the same type of games constantly. I've created, for the first 10 years of my career, I think I created hundreds of platformer games for mobile phones, for smartphones. They were pretty much the same thing. You moved from left to right, maybe sometimes up and down, but they were always the same type of games. Eventually I started branching out into trying different things and reading a lot about games. I don't play a lot of games, I read about it and let my mind do this work. Pretty much how your brain is now thinking about turn-based with a timer, not a real timer, but countdown, not a real countdown, but let your brain go crazy and think about the type of game that could be and how fun it could be if we did this or that. And eventually we end up with either a failing prototype that's just a waste of time and we have to move on to something else, or we end up with an interesting game. I hope the latter, because I'm gonna create Space Grunts 3 and I am gonna try to get that timer thing working. Whatever it's gonna be, that's my main goal right now. Now the important tip here is that if you're gonna mix up genres, try to communicate that very clearly to the players so that they know what to expect. It's like this game, but wait a minute before you start downloading it and handing me your cash. It's also a little bit like that, and it plays a little bit different than that. It's a certain communication that you have to make clear to your players. And I think if you do that right and you can find the right audience, because it's gonna be hard coming up with new stuff and then making it interesting to players, because most players will just stick to what they know. And that's why certain online games are so massively big right now. Not a lot of changes can be made by the developers because then people will start abandoning it. And that's a shame because as game developers you want to try different things, but it's also interesting to try and maneuver and collectively as game developers try to push gamers towards new directions. Because bullet heaven is now slowly coming into other type of genres, and then we have extraction like games, which originally was just multiplayer games, but now we have single player games that are also extraction based, and tiny changes like that are really making games more and more interesting, and it shows that we are not done yet with games. There are still a lot of things we can explore and try, as long as gamers give us that little room to wiggle the genres and find something new. So if you're a gamer watching this video, be a little bit open-minded towards new and interesting things, and not everything works. Not every idea is a good idea, but every now and then developers come up with a little tiny twist that might actually be more interesting to play around with, and then you'll eventually notice a lot of games will incorporate this and then slowly change it again and again and again and again. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below, come hang out on the Discord, and I will see you next week. Bye.